And today in the morning, I've been having a lot of thoughts and ideas. So, one of them I wanted to share, which is how or what to do with disillusioned, disappointed hearts. I hear this a lot from my clients and also from my own experience, obviously. And this could be not only about relationship, which we usually tend to have this, but also about work settings and entities, because obviously we can be disillusioned and um, disappointed about the work we do or the relationship we lead, whatever the relationship we're thinking of, the work relationship or personal relationship. This could be the topic to listen to. And oftentimes I hear people say that, well, I've been disillusioned, I've been disappointed. Um, I'm suffering, right? Or I need to get away, or uh, I guess what I often hear is that we tend to suffer a lot from being disillusioned, from being disappointed. But I am beginning to think that maybe it's more likely that we're suffering from not doing anything about it, that we're suffering. And that's why I wanted to just bring some thoughts for you to consider if you're someone who's in this state of being where we're suffering from being disillusioned, disappointed. You know, when we start into this work setting or into this relationship with full love, with a lot of our manuals of or our expectations of this is how it's going to be, this is how it's going to be, this is what it is, and then we enter and then we're like, no, that's not what's happening, or that's not how we expected it would happen, and therefore we get disillusioned or disappointed. And then what happens usually, I find, is that we don't do anything about it, or we keep suffering from being in that state, and we don't really take the information or the lessons of what is it actually that our disillusioned or disappointed hearts telling us and what we want to do about it. So some of the things that you could consider that I have had myself as well so much of, especially from breaking up in a personal relationship from my first love, all the disappointment and disillusionment that I've experienced. Now, looking at back after so many years, I'm realizing that the biggest lessons that disillusionment and disappointment were telling me really is that I should have my own identity, irrespective of the work or relationship or anything else that I have. I should have my own identity, and I can't really, or I don't want to enter into any relationship unless I have understood for myself who is it that I want to be, how do I want to show up, and what values I really value, and what are my principles. And the disappointment is really showing me that I haven't really followed them, or I haven't um, really been clear about them. So the disappointment, disillusionment is telling me, hello, now it's time to do something about it. Right? So if we want to build up our identity, our values and our principles, then we really want to be looking at, well, what is it really important for me? What is it that is really in the center of me as a person? Is this work, or is this relationship, or it's something else? Because we often make this relationship or this work like the center of our lives, and everything else somehow surrounds it and gets adjusted to this work or this relationship, right? And then if it doesn't work out, then we're like, well, I've sacrificed everything and things didn't work out, and I'm blaming this, and that's how I'm suffering from it. So basically, lingering in this disillusionment, disappointment, rather than deciding, okay, what is it telling me? What do I want to do next? And maybe the disillusionment and disappointment telling me that I need to start putting some boundaries, right? I need to put some boundaries as to this is I'm accepting and this is I'm not accepting. And what do I want to do about that? What are my consequences if I don't accept this? So that could be another way to look at it, is to say disillusionment and disappointment are great opportunities for us to not only be lingering at experiencing the pain. Of course, we need to experience the pain, but also deciding this is good information. Now, what do I want to do? Right. So, first, as I said, look at this might be telling us that we want to have our own identities or our own um, ideas and principles and values of what is it that we really want, instead of being overwhelmed by the other strong entity. And by entity I mean workplace, or by entity I mean a relationship, whatever you want to consider under that entity, right? And the second is maybe that's telling me that I want to have my boundaries, that I want to actually set and follow through and respect. And the other one, that the lesson that we might be getting is also that having a manuals or expectation list about the other person may not work. And that's good information to know, because oftentimes we get into the relationships believing certain things about the person or expecting certain things about the person, and that's absolutely natural. Most of the time, this is how we do and how we act. And I think that's also beautiful in some ways, because we also have this capacity to be overwhelmed by our love, capacity to be fully and 100% there for the relationship. And that's amazing. Those are amazing skills. However, if we don't get the reply from the other side the same way, we are likely to get disillusioned, disappointed, and say, well, it's not being reciprocated, right? And if we're saying that it's being not being reciprocated, then the question is, what are we going to do about it? Right? Because oftentimes we stay there in the side where it's not being reciprocated. We just stay there and we don't really do much about it, or we keep suffering under it, believing that this is how it is and I can't do much to change it and all of this stuff. So the question is it worth staying in that relationship if it's not being reciprocated? And that's actually what we want in the relationship, to have reciprocal level of relationship. I don't know, maybe some people do want, other people don't. But we want to be clear as to, okay, it's not being reciprocated. What do I want to do next? Right? So that's why I just want us to, after being disillusioned, being disappointed, I just don't want us to be living under the influence or the consequences of that feeling for so long that we start developing resentment, we start developing this sarcasm and many other attitudes or habits to deal with it in some ways, right? And then we keep harming ourselves because we start telling ourselves that it's not going to be better, it's not going to be anything different, we're just going to continue suffering in this relationship, and therefore I may just as well cope with all the tools of making those remarks that don't really use me, that are not really useful, or being resentful, being drained and exhausted, and all of this stuff. Instead of doing that, let's just learn the lesson of our disillusionment and disappointment, of what is it really that it's telling us. Maybe it's also telling us that we need to forgive. And maybe it's also telling us that we actually have so much, excuse me, so much capacity to live a life in fullest And us constraining ourselves in that relationship is not really useful for us. So that's why, my dears, I hope that you will give it a try and learn from your own disillusion, disappointing experience, and really dig into what is it that they're telling you. And maybe it's just telling you that time to make a decision and decide what you really want and go after what you want instead of constraining yourself or coping yourself with the relationship that you have. Or it's maybe telling you to forgive and continue building new relationship within that setting where you are. And now that you know how that person is, and now that you know how you show up, and then decide how you want to show up and make the best of that relationship that you have. Okay, my dears, have a wonderful Wednesday, and I will talk to you probably very soon.